Tubeway Army were a London-based band who on paper only existed between 1977 and 1979. However, they actually existed as a musical entity longer than that, but under a different name. Just bear with me. So they started as a punk band, and they transitioned to synth-pop. They were fronted by Gary Numan, who initially went by the stage name Valerian, and before that, his birth name was Gary Webb. And you might have heard of Gary Numan because he's been a very popular musician and singer. And in fact, so they effectively transitioned to recording under the name Gary Numan, but with the same band, partly as an attempt to disconnect themselves from the punk past that they had. So there were 2 albums that were released under the Tubeway Army name. Hi, my name's Dan, and this was the second album by Tubeway Army, and the last before they transitioned to starting to release stuff under the name Gary Numan instead, that was the stage name of the front guy of the band. It's my first listen to this album. I do know the song Our Friends Electric. It's quite hard to have been around in the UK at that time and not come across it, or in fact since. It's been a hugely well-known song and very influential and iconic in some ways. So the album's a loose concept album, which is kind of following a story that Gary Numan wrote or was writing at the time about a dystopian future involving androids and apparently aliens. Musically, it's kind of a mixture because it's got at times real drums and at times drum machine, at times real bass and at times synth bass, I think. Certainly at times electric guitar, but there's quite a lot of synth in here. And I believe this is a mini Moog mostly, and there's the quite what nowadays might be known as PHAT, P-H-A-T synth lines that are just kind of really strident and dominant. And there's a lot of that kind of synth sound going on here. Musically, they particularly seem keen on the idea of doing something in a chord and then going down a tone, which is an interesting musical shift. Possibly they thought it had a particularly mechanical feel to it doing that. So the whole thing is certainly meant to have a kind of clinical, mechanical feel to it. One of the things I found interesting is that while they're achieving that, at times it also has a kind of falteringness to it as well, a slight awkwardness to it. That maybe emphasizes that kind of disjoint feel to it. I'm not sure it was deliberate, but it certainly comes across in the playing. And most of the playing, in fact, I think all of the playing is not sequenced, so it doesn't have that kind of metronomic feel that sequenced stuff often has. So it has similarities at times to. So I looked up The Model by Kraftwerk, which was hugely influential single, which came out the year before this album did. I haven't looked up When Vienna by Ultravox came out, but that has a kind of similar mechanical and distant and cold feel to it deliberately. The single Our Friends Electric was a surprise #1 hit in the UK. They hadn't expected that kind of sudden exposure and breakthrough. So that happened through, off the back of this album. So I've been saying the whole thing's kind of got this mechanical, deliberate feel to it. So Gary Numan, at this point in time, and for the next couple of albums at least, had this kind of android persona that he had adopted, and it certainly comes through in his singing, which is quite accented and distant and oddly processed. Now, apparently the persona came about as a mixture of an appearance on Top of the Pops, which is a UK TV programme, where because of rampant acne that he had makeup slapped on him to to hide all that. And then he would not be very demonstrative on stage because he had crippling stage fright, apparently. That's the story. But I kind of feel like there may be a little bit more intent than that to it, because the whole thing has this very kind of android feel to it. And in the singing as well. Even in the talking, which is there's a few bits of talking, especially in Our Friends Electric. So I have this theory, so bear with me with this, that when people have traumatic things happen to them, or have particular anxieties or issues with that, then one thing that can be very helpful for them is to talk about it, or to go see a therapist, which is effectively talking about it. But I think that, so my theory is that society as a whole also does a similar thing, which is it deals with particular concerns that are general concerns for society, or traumatic events that happen, by kind of working them out through the popular media that it produces. So this, it'll appear in film and television and novels and magazine articles and things like that, but also in music. And music's one of the most accessible ways of expressing things in popular media. So often it's I think music can be quite responsive to what's going on in a society. And so this was late 70s. We're heading towards the advent of personal computers, and at a time when computers are becoming quite, there's some concern about computers in society, and you can see it through the films that came through at the same sort of time. But I think there was this slice of music that came through, this kind of synth-pop, that had a very deliberate kind of distant, mechanical, synthetic feel to it, which was just expressing this concern over a machine's going to take over. And we've still got these concerns going on, but they're expressed in different ways now. Anyway, so this album is at times quite dystopian, is quite nihilistic. We've got track names like Me, I Disconnect From You, Praying to the Aliens, and I Nearly Married a Human, which kind of shows the rest of the song titles may be more innocuous. I think possibly the darkest track on the album is a track called Down in the Park, which is very atmospheric. It's kind of slowed down, and it has this quite menacing feel to it. Overall, I think it's effective. I think it's interesting. I think it is dark, but I think bizarrely, I've got the phrase refreshingly dark written down here, as if dark can be refreshing. But I think it can. It was just expressing something of the time. So I like it. I don't think it's necessarily an album for every day. I think if you played this over and over again, it might have some interesting effects on you. But for the occasional listen, I quite like this album. Yeah. So, as always, I want to invite you to join in the conversation by telling me what you think of this album through the comments box. That's it from me for now.